Financial freedom and financial independence are typically used in conjunction with one another, and that's completely fine because the definition of both are very subjective. It could mean one thing to one person and something different to the next person. Let me do a quick flashback and explain to you my story. I'm currently an engineer working the typical 9 to 5 with some overtime, and every day I would go into work, do my time, and go home. I was pretty content with my job, but as far as happy, I think like most people, you can only be so happy when it comes to working for a company. But that in itself is also very subjective. But if you're here, then you're probably in the same shoes as I am. By March of 2020, COVID-19 started to make headlines and made its way to news outlets all over the world. By April, some companies were urged and mandated to make their employees practice social distancing. This eventually led to work from home for me, and the same thing for probably so many others. As time went on, it led to many uncertainties and questions. When would I return to work, or will I have to work from home indefinitely? What accommodations would I need to make this transition long term? And then, for some odd reason or another, I started to question my job security. Will the job be the same when I return, or will I still have the job? Is it enough for me and my family, or is there something I can do about it? Typical paranoia sets in as you start to feel the pressures of being stuck indoors too often and too long. And in these uncertain times, I decided to take action and not leave my future in the hands of the company that I work for. Instead, I wanted my future to be determined by my own hands. Sure, there have been people that do just fine working the 9 to 5 and make a nice living off it too. But I started to think that it was just not for me. And that's when I started thinking, how can I achieve these endeavors? And how can I be free? I'm probably going to get some flack for this, but this is my interpretation. When I think of financial independence, I usually think about the FIRE movement, which is the Financial Independence Retire Early. Chris Hogan from the Dave Ramsey Show has a really good article that you can read that I'll leave in the description below. The typical person that's part of the FIRE movement will prioritize these things. Aggressively pay off their debt, like auto loans, credit cards, mortgages, and even their student loans. Live frugally. Work as much as possible, aggressively save money, and invest as much as possible. When these investments cover all their expenses, then they retire. And I've witnessed this firsthand. My father is financially independent, and he worked a painstakingly hard job and long hours in a steel mill for 26 years. He saved all his money and invested almost every cent that he made. When the company decided to move his business out of the country, and with everything already paid off, he decided it was finally time to retire at 50 years old. This was probably back in 2009, and granted, I wouldn't call this early retirement in today's standards, but it is earlier than the typical retirement age. Needless to say, we didn't get to see my father very much during those times, and we understood why he put in all that hard work. But I wanted to play a bigger role in my family's lives, and I wanted to dedicate more of my resources to my family while still maintaining my freedom. And I think the FIRE method is really good if you're single because if you have someone that is financially dependent on you, it makes it more difficult. For instance, if you have young children, it's harder to maintain the balance in regards to your children's financial needs and keeping consistent with the FIRE movement. But that's not to say that it's impossible. It just poses a challenge to overcome. But then again, it's hard to do anything if you have someone that is financially dependent on you. Financial freedom can have some similarities, but to me it has some important differences. For the most part, I think the person seeking freedom isn't necessarily frugal and isn't necessarily trying to retire early. To me, the whole point of financial freedom is to have the freedom to choose who you want to work for, when you want to work, and how you want to work. Not to say that you can't do it with independence, but consistency and longevity are more focused, especially since it's more aggressive in paying off debt and savings and investments. If you take financial freedom at its face value, it just means you are free to be a little bit more lenient in making purchases or spending money without affecting your livelihood. Your outlook of financial freedom may take a different road than mine. Maybe for you, it's breaking free from your 9 to 5, or maybe it's just not to stress over finances, or even just to retire early. What is your definition of financial freedom? For me to achieve my financial freedom, I plan to free myself from the shackles of my 9 to 5 by building multiple businesses, creating multiple streams of income, and automate it as much as possible to make more time for myself and, more importantly, my family. In my financial freedom, I don't really plan on retiring super early, but I want to be able to live in the now, all the while having the freedom of financials without relying on a company for a pension. It may be a rough road, but it's going to be well worth it in the end. This is also a bit of introduction to my site. I plan on building many affiliate marketing sites utilizing video media platforms as well as social media to grow my business. If this is something that's right up your alley, then come follow me on my journey as I show you everything that I do to reach my goals so that you can duplicate it for yourself and reach your financial freedom.